Legal Information Technology Pty Limited would like to thank the South African Board for Sheriffs for inviting us to give this presentation today. Established in 1998, the company is focused on developing software for the sheriff's profession. Each director brought to LIT their extensive individual skills of software development, training, expert knowledge of the sheriff's profession, experience of working in the sheriff's profession, and the vision to provide a stable solution for any size of sheriff's office. We strive for a high ethical standards, always endeavoring to solve our customer queries, including after hours. We are committed to deliver solutions within the boundaries of the Sheriff's Act. We believe in personal service to our customers and to be flexible in our approach to individual requests and problems. LIT provides solutions to sheriffs in the northern and central provinces and is in a position to provide services, software and expertise subcontinent-wide. What are we presenting today? Accounting practices and how to implement them by using the LIT Sheriff System. We will be covering a variety of topics today around accounting practices and how to implement them by using the LIT Sheriff System. With the limited time we have, we will endeavour to give you an overview of features relating to invoicing, payment processing, statement, reconciliation of accounts, and issuing of arrear notices from the LIT Sheriff System. The key thread binding all these topics together is credit control, protecting the lifeblood of your office, which is cash flow. Accounting practices, introduction and background. Credit control, some important notes. Credit policy and terms of trade. Many businesses supply goods and services on the basis of informal arrangements. Unfortunately, this means that when disputes arise, there is no clear line in the sand as to what the terms of trade were from the start. Having clear terms of trade and a firm credit policy is an excellent way of mitigating and preventing bad debts. Have a credit application process and make sure you complete thorough credit history and business reference checks before you offer credit to new customers. Clearly articulate to your customer upfront and in writing your payment terms and credit limits to enforce your seriousness of your collection program. It is important that all your staff understand and follow this credit policy. Have your credit application, credit policy and terms of trade reviewed by your attorney and/or accountant to make sure they are legally compliant so that there will be no impediments when it comes to recovering debt. Returns, invoices and statements. Ensure that the correct account is being debited, the correct fees are being levied and the attorney's reference number is correct. A 10-second check by, for example, the deputy before serving or executing a document will save unnecessary effort in having to recover bad debt due to incorrect information. If you provide the right information on your documents and invoice promptly, you are more likely to get paid on time. Staff knowledge of fees and charges. Admin staff and deputies, both alike, must have an intimate knowledge of fees and charges associated with each type of process. Train and retrain, review and test this knowledge. Make sure your systems are up to date and monitored. The secret to a good data management is well-maintained information. Ensure fees are correctly loaded and coded into your system as per Government Gazette. Monitor your debtors ledger closely, keeping a close eye on how old the debt is becoming before it is being paid. LIT Sheriff System has built into it the necessary tools, features and reporting capabilities to achieve this goal. Make use of them. Implement a robust accounts receivable process. It is very important to have a robust collection process in place with set timescales for the various stages of communication, letters, emails and phone calls. Map out your process clearly and make sure it's understood by your staff. Here are some key pointers to consider. Invoice as early and as often as possible, as receiving invoices late encourages customers to default on payment. Send 30, 60, 90-day reminder letters highlighting your trade terms and those that are not being met. Regularly follow up on all slow payers to encourage payment. Once customers know they will always make contact, they will always be contacted when payment is late, you are more likely to get priority from their scheduled payments. Don't finish a follow-up call without a commitment for a payment. It is in the event of debtor disputes, insist on the payment of the undisputed amounts to maintain your cash flow while resolving the issue on the amounts that are in dispute. Manage your debtors. Credit control is an ongoing process and an integral part of the success of the Sheriff's Office. Review your outstanding debtor reports. Ensure that you understand and have insight into the flow of information in these reports. Do not let outstanding debtors linger. Address it immediately, as it will go stale. The older the debt owing, the more effort and expense is needed to recover the debt, eroding the already thin margins of your operation. And if not, you may face having to write off this debt due to it being too expensive to recover. Remember, it is not solely the tool you use to administer and process the data in your office, but also the practices, processes and procedures around those tools that creates an environment of success. Credit control. We're now going to cover the following topics: account configuration and settings, the basis on which you open an account on the system, and what can be set and preset to ensure that your credit control policies are applied. Invoicing and statements. We will address the various invoicing mechanisms and statement creation environments in the system. Payment processing and reconciliating of debtor accounts. In this part, we will address more specifically the reconciliation of payments against outstanding debt from an attorney. And then finally, the issuing of arrear notices. Credit control, account configuration and settings. It is important that you capture and maintain the correct contact details of a debtor's account, as this information is important when attempting to recover debt owing. Details to capture and maintain include address, docx, court pigeonhole if in use, email, telephone, cell and fax number. All of this is important. Choose the account type wisely, as the different account types have implications on how you would like to apply your credit control policy in your office. The invoice account type, first one we're listing, is the preferred method of accounts which require a high level of credit control. The upside of this account type is that payments, credit and debit notes, as well as journals on the account, are reconciled to the level of an individual return of service or execution. The downside, however, is that it requires more work to post payments on large accounts. But alas, we have included a multitude of tools to assist you. Balance brought forward, deposit, cash and control accounts all work in the same manner, and the type distinction is for account identification and reporting only. Essentially, account reconciliation is only done on accounting period level. Prepaid accounts functionality works similar to invoice type accounts, with the same level of reconciliation detail. This account type is specifically designed for walk-ins, where a receptionist is able to immediately capture the plaintiff, client or authorized agent's details and payment, producing a prepaid receipt to be attached to the document for further processing by the office staff. This has the desired effect of having the payment recorded against a return invoice when it is returned or rendered. Thus, reconciliation is immediately done. Although not critical for credit control, this setting indicates whether an invoice must be created for each return or per accounting period. First one we're listing is the return, which indicates that a VAT invoice is generated with every return of service and printed with that return. Monthly is a consolidated VAT invoice would be generated for all returns in the accounting period. So if you have an attorney that sends you 500 or 600 service requests in a month, you wouldn't be sending them 500 or 600 VAT invoices. You would be sending them one VAT invoice consolidating the work of all 500 into that invoice. None. This VAT invoice type, obviously, the word says it all, is only really used for internal control accounts where VAT is of no consequence. The issuing of a VAT invoice is of no consequence. Active. The active state on account, when it is unticked, indicates that the account essentially is closed. This will disallow any registration of new work on the account. However, payments, debit and credit notes, as well as journals, will still be processed. Registration approval required. This option activates the functionality requiring a pre-registration approval on the account to be loaded by the account clerk for a specific matter. It also then keeps track of these approvals that are awaiting registration. As you can see in the example to the right, highlighted in the green box, there is a defendant registration count of 2, meaning that 2 defendants can be registered against the case number supplied there 54321 of 20. It also then obviously keeps track when that registration has been done and the number of defendants able to be registered, and then reporting the return number. This functionality is more for larger offices where an account may be closed and the lady who wishes to register the document is unable to do so. She will approach the accounts department, who will investigate and then make a call to say that this document may be registered, it is deemed as urgent, and then supply such approval on the account so that the person who then registered this document is able to do so and then process the document further. Blacklist status. This status is actually only got 2 states. The other states that are listed are mainly for purposes of understanding why it is blacklisted. When an account is in the blacklisted state, no new registration is allowed on the account. However, you can set up some of your operators to have the option to override and forcefully register this, but for that a password is registered for that operator against their operator account in the system, allowing them to override the blockage and actually registering the document. The different states there, temporary, permanent, temporary until balance is 0, and debt written off is more for the accounts clerk to understand why they put it into a state of being blacklisted, and they can appropriately act upon that. The blacklisted status, by the way, is also listed on the job card that is printed upon registration. Credit limit. The credit limit is a setting that can be entered, and if set to a value, will, when upon registration of a document, warn the operator that the account is already exceeded the supplied credit limit as set out by the principal of the office. This does not block the registration of such document and only gives a pop-up so that the person who's doing the registration knows that the account is now being exceeded. This is mainly for your smaller offices where you don't have rigorous different personnel working on an account and doing the registration. It's the girl who the person who's actually doing the registration and the person who handles the accounts is one and the same, and thus when they do the registration they at least can acknowledge and see that the account is in arrears and plan to do something about it, but carry on with the registration if so deemed to be fit. Including credit control, include this account in the credit control filters for issuing arrear notices from the system. Instances may exist, however, where if the account is in arrears, the principal may not wish to address this in the general notice or issuing of notices in terms of the account being in arrears and would like to handle it on a more personal note. In that instance, one can exclude the account from the credit control filters and notices will not be sent out to the offending party. Invoicing and statements. Depending on the type of invoice setting on the attorney's account, which you can see on the right, an invoice is printed with every return being rendered. This is called the return type invoicing method, and in this case the VAT invoice is printed together with the return for every return for that attorney. It also contains the detailed breakdown of the charges for that matter. Or a VAT invoice can be generated at the end of the month as a consolidated invoice for all returns during the month. As you can see in the bottom example, there are 4 matters there which have been invoiced for that month. Thus it's a one-page invoice summarizing those matters with the totals and all the necessary requirements to make this a VAT invoice. The main benefit of this is for large volume of work from a single company or a single attorney, where instead of sending them, if they would be sending you 500-600 documents a month to handle, you sending them 500-600 VAT invoices that they need to file on their end. Here we would consolidate it into a one invoice, 3 pages, 4 pages long, which they just have to file on their end for purposes of claiming that VAT back. The large attorney companies prefer this. Invoices can be reprinted at any time. The heading of a reprinted invoice will always be marked as a copy, no exceptions. Statements are generated at month end. Statements for any period can be reprinted at any time as a history statement. Statements can be printed or emailed. Statements for accounts type of invoice do not have a balance brought forward value, as outstanding invoices are reprinted on every statement until paid in full. As you can see per the example, we have 4 periods of debt where returns were done, and where 3 of those periods are periods which are still outstanding and owing to the sheriff. Thus the detail is being printed per period that the amount is owing, i.e. if a return has been paid, it will not appear in that period. Only that, and only the balance of that which has not been paid would be showed, i.e. you do not see an opening balance at the top right. Statements for other accounts reflect only the movement for the month, with an opening balance for the outstanding amount to the top right. As you can see, the opening balance for this statement, as an example, is 109 Rand 28 cents, then showing the movement of 2 returns being done, and closing off with a balance of 221 Rand and 88 cents. What is lost on the statement is what was that 109 Rand 28 cents for. On this accounting method, you never reconcile your payment right back against the matter. It gets reconciled against the accounting period, and if that accounting period, 61 to 90 days, had 100 Rand in it and part of it is already paid, you do not really know which part is paid and unpaid. This is not the preferred method, and we never recommend that this is used for accounts. Payment processing and reconciling debtor accounts. Processing payments correctly is a cornerstone activity of credit control. Depending on the type of account, the system has a variety of ways of processing a payment. For accounts of type balance brought forward, deposit, cash, and control account, the process is fairly straightforward, bar the fact that the operator can apply the payment to various accounting periods. I'm not going into this feature in detail, as it is a very straightforward feature. For accounts of type prepaid, the system has a single capturing point of the payment against the document, still to be registered on the system. Again, I'm not going to discuss this one in detail, but to say that this is a mechanism whereby a payment can be processed into the system binding against a certain case out of a certain court, and when that document is then registered in the system, it will automatically bind itself back to the prepaid receipt. For accounts of type invoice, the system has a feature-rich process to assist the operator in allocating the funds of the payment against returns debited on the account. This is the preferred account type for strong credit control. I will now highlight these features. Processing the payments in an invoice type account. The first activity is to select the debtor. This can be done in three ways, either by entering the account code of the debtor, double-clicking on the account code field and entering an advanced search feature, or thirdly by just typing the attorney's name into the name field and the system will auto-complete until you find the relevant account. The next item to select is the bank account. The bank account into which the deposit will be made for these funds received. Thirdly, and importantly, is the payment method. Various payment methods exist to capture the details of the payment, which is check, direct deposit, electronic, or cash. Depending on the payment method selected, the fields will change accordingly to capture the relevant details. For the purpose of this exercise, I've selected the check method to also explain and show the facility whereby a back-end system is used to capture the branch and account number against a certain attorney's account. Should you enter new account details for that, the operator would be prompted to double-check the account and branch details, or otherwise the operator can confirm it by adding a note to the system that would then allow that branch and account to be used against that debtor's account. Lastly, the payment details are then entered, i.e. the check number in this instance, the branch account number and the account name, as well of course the amount that is being paid. Where the payment equals a specific accounting period, one only but needs to double-click that accounting period and all the transactions in that period making up that amount, in this instance of R1,105.08, would then be auto-selected and posted against the payment. If that is not sufficient, you can go to the allocation panel. In this panel there are various areas that I would like to highlight. The first area I'd like to highlight is the area concerned with the payment details against a specific selected return on the account. In this area you can either use the pay button to allocate a full value of R56.10 against the item, or you can reset the payment, clearing out the payment, or you can type in specific values to be allocated against this item. The next area I would like to show out is the area at the bottom, which has the pay all, pay oldest to newest, pay select accounting period, return or VAT number buttons in the area. The Pay All button obviously selects all the returns on the account and allocates them as paid against the payment amount. The Pay Oldest to Newest would take the payment amount and allocate it from the oldest return in order of it being debited to the newest one until the funds have been depleted. The third one I would like to point out is the selected accounting period. If you know that this payment is for a specific accounting period and you did not make use of the feature on the first screen, you can at this point type in the accounting period and hit the button, and all the items in that accounting period will be allocated against the payment. A selected return, if the attorney supplied you 3 or 4 return numbers that you are paying, this is the place where you can enter the return number and hit the button to pay that selected item. Lastly, you can have a payment from the attorney which is referenced that he's paying a certain VAT number, and then you can enter the VAT invoice number there, hit the button, and then the items on that VAT invoice will be marked as paid against the payment amount. I'd like to draw your attention to the right top of the screen where we have the payment amount, allocated, and difference. This is a continually updated little area that shows you what the payment amount is that you entered on the first screen, how much of that amount has been allocated, and the difference between the two. You will not be able to close this payment until the difference value has been depleted to 0, i.e. that which you are allocating is equal to the payment amount. Should you attempt to close it, you will be prompted and warned about it, and then you can have an automatic transaction created, which will be an unallocated value left on the account. We prefer not to go down this route because those unallocated values always accumulate and become a headache into the future, but if one must, one has to. The only way to get rid of the unallocated amount is when you find out where it was supposed to go, you use an internal journal to journalize the unallocated amount to the selected return to which it should have been posted. The last area I'd like to discuss is the area of the view data area, which is but a table of the same data in the allocation panel, except here it's in rows and columns, each row representing a return and the value of that return still owing. You can also here use the pay and clear buttons to actually pay an item or clear the payment against an item. You can sort on the various columns by clicking on the column header, or you can do sophisticated searching by clicking on the column header and entering a certain value, a case number for instance, to just list in the rows a specific case number, all the returns for that case number. The final item that needs to be done after everything is in balance, i.e. the amount payable and the amount allocated is now equal, is to actually close the payment. On the first screen we would go to the close payment button. Should the amounts be equal, the payment would be closed and completed, ready to be consolidated onto a deposit slip, or you'll be prompted for an amount to be left unallocated, should that be the case. When a payment has been closed, this is what the screen would look like. At this point, I would like to point your attention to the right bottom where you have collection in progress little panel there, indicating that this account was in a collection process, of which is in the collection process batch number 27, i.e. notifications for account in arrears have already been sent to this attorney. But as we can see, this attorney has now brought his account up to date and is now again in good standing, obviously depending on your office credit control policy. But at this point in time, the person posting the payment has the option to actually close the collection process against the attorney, and thus removing him from the batch and receiving a next notification in the steps, whatever they may be in your collection process steps. Credit control, issuing of arrear notices. There are two main features available in the system in terms of issuing of arrear notices and exercising credit control. There's the manual control mechanism, whereby you can directly manage a debtor's account from one screen, having the ability to record notes, generate correspondence from predefined templates, view balance, the details of those balances, and so much more. The second environment is a batch control environment. This is an iterative process of maintaining your standard debtors collection process against your customized predefined collection steps. The system knows what correspondence to send to which account holder if outstanding debt has not yet been resolved. Let's look at the manual control environment first. When selecting the manual control environment against a debtor, you will be presented with this screen, also known as the phone login screen. Typically, if you give the person a call, you'd also like the screen in front of you if it's relating to outstanding debt. Now I'm going to take you through various panels on the system. This is the status area to indicate or show to you whether the account is active, whether the registration approval, the required mechanism is activated, and what is the blacklisted status of the debtor. You can also change these states from this screen. You do not have to go back to the accounts screen. The second area of interest is the balance areas, the account balance area. This gives you a summary of the balance per accounting period and the total balance on the account. When clicking on one of the balances that are outstanding, you will then be presented with this detailed screen, which lists out all the transactions for that specific accounting period. Interesting to note that if you double click on one of the return items here, you will then be passed through to the returns inquiry screen, where you can actually view what the return looked like, what the content of the return is, what charges were debited, who did the return, who was the deputy, all the required information relating to that return. You have here an area which is created for internal notes. The internal notes area is for internal use only. By hitting the insert note button, you get taken to the top of the note, so your newest notes are always at the top. Date, time, and your operator code would be presented, and you can type a note. At any point in time, you can also print these notes to maybe send to your manager, principal, for further action. The next area I would like to show you is the select letter to merge with. Is the area where you can actually generate and merge correspondence against predefined templates. These templates are controlled by the office themselves, not by us. So you can create all your own new templates as you wish, where and when, through our templating system. You can then select that template here and merge it with the back-end debtors information and account balances. You can also see there's an additional button there called Journal. From that button you can be passed through to a journal, which will prompt you for actions that you want to perform, and that would then generate a journal for you for the purpose that you want to use the journal. Maybe you want to write the debt off, transfer it to another account. There are various options that can be executed at that point in time. The last area of interest is the bottom area there. This is a list of all previous correspondence generated against this debtor's account. When clicking on one of those items, you will be presented with the correspondence that was generated. We've obfuscated some of the information because, although being of previous years, the information is still valid. This was a live database that I generated this from. The second area of interest is the batch control area, where the process is automated, and the system keeps track at what stage each attorney who's in a collection process is at and what has to happen next. A predefined set of collection steps is defined in your backend, and this is customizable for every office depending on how you would like to proceed with your collection steps. The letters that are attached, or the correspondence that attached to each step, is also customizable by each office. Here is an example of a 4-step collection process whereby a first letter would go out to a account in arrears, reminding them of the terms of condition in a friendly manner. The second one that goes out is a letter which has been more forcefully worded to encourage the payment of the outstanding debt. The third one is the legal obligation of a final demand that summons is going to be issued, and the fourth step is the issuing of that summons. Now, to explain how the process works in the back end, I will try and do it with the diagram you see in front of you. You would start by firstly creating a collection batch, where you are creating a batch and setting up the filter which will collect the accounts which are in arrears, which satisfy that filter. The next step, this is the initiation step of a batch into the process, would be to execute that batch, which then executes the batch in terms of the collection step, which would be step number 1, generating the necessary first credit control letter to the attorneys in that batch. The second step would be to increment the collection step. This is automatically because the first step is now completed and the batch is ready to be executed on the second step of the process. During the month, as you have correspondence returning and possibly hopefully payments coming in from those accounts, the accounts will be taken out of the batch. This is done not by going to the account, but actually directly from the payment screen, which we will see a little bit later on, whereby you can then remove the offending account from the batch so it doesn't receive the next or proceed to the next step. which is the third one in the batch. And now you've come to the next month and you will execute that batch again and create a new batch for that point in time. Firstly, let's look at the creating batch process. You create a new batch, hit the button, and you will be presented with the following screen. Here are the filters we spoke of, 4 sets of filters that you can set up. Whether the account status in the selection of accounts to be included into the batch is to be ignored. Only the active accounts or only the inactive accounts are selected. Secondly, the blacklisting selection. Do you only want blacklisted accounts in this batch? Do you want all non-blacklisted accounts in this batch, or just ignore that setting and include the account into the batch? Thirdly, and this is the important one, from which stage are you going to execute your first step? There's a 30, 60, 90 and 120 days. Recommendation is obviously at 30 days. You start your process, but your office may be different and you may wish to start your process when the debt hits 60 days. The last area for setting up the filter is, if populated with a value, was indicative of the type of amount that has to be outstanding. You don't want to start a collection process for a £5 debt in 30 days, and this account is a $3,000 Rand account, which is ludicrous to go and start a debt collection process for £1. So you can filter out based on the value of outstanding debt. When saving the criteria, a batch would then be generated and the accounts would be loaded against which the necessary action of the first step is going to be executed. The system header at the top indicates which step you're at. This is an old batch that I pulled up for the testing database. So there we are in step 3. This is merge number 27. This is batch number 23. It's very old, 2011-03. 30, and was created by the system administrator. The next step is going to be the summons that's going to be executed, which is the step 4 as in the example we had previously. You have a couple of extra buttons where you can remove all out zero balances from the batch, i.e. if payment had come in and whomever posted that payment and zeroed out the outstanding debt did not release the account from this collection process, you can do it by just hitting one button and it'll remove all zero balances from the batch. You don't want to go and generate a letter if the guy doesn't owe you any money. Hitting the merge button will kick off the process and the correspondence would then be generated. From the screen you can activate and execute certain actions by right-clicking on a debtor. You can activate a pop-up menu from where you can remove this debtor from the collection process. If you only remove him and the debt is still outstanding, that debtor will be picked up in any future batches that are created from a new, as the debt will then still be outstanding, and he will start back at step number 1. By removing and excluding the debtor, you will remove him from this batch and excluding from any other future batches until the tick, as we saw in the account control and setup environment, the tick on the debtor master record, where you can actually include or exclude the account from active credit control. This will exclude that debtor. You have to go and switch it back manually on if you wish to re-include him into future batches again. You can do a journal on the outstanding debt, generated right from here. By activating that button, the system would automatically generate a journal and you will receive a pop-up menu from where you can decide how you want this journal to be executed. Do you want to write the debt off? Do you want to move it to a suspense account for writing it off later? Do you want to accumulate it into a bad debt account on which you on a monthly basis put a credit note through so you can claim the VAT back? Various options are available. You can also print a statement from this screen by selecting Print Selected Statement 4 or Print All Statement 4. These two options are available to print a statement for the current or previous period for the account. That concludes this presentation. We would like to thank you for your interest in participating and hope you have found some useful information.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Now, Leslie, just a question. When you are creating the collection batch, does the system automatically collaborate with the allocation function? Like, to simplify the question, if you are busy doing the or creating the collection batch and payment comes whilst you are busy doing it, and maybe another data capturer or another staff personnel allocates the funds, does it pick it up automatically so that you can remove it from the collection batch?
The answer to that question is yes. You will, on the payment screen, when you created a batch, it only takes seconds to actually create the batch. The minute you hit the button, the minute the batch is created, anybody who would post after those couple of seconds a payment would actually see that this debtor is in a collection batch and can then obviously remove the debtor immediately upon successfully posting that payment, so that you don't send it out to the debtor, any collection instructions or collection correspondence to the debtor. So yes, the system in the back end is totally integrated. The operator posting the checks can see that the item is or is not in a collection batch, and vice from the other perspective of the person actually creating the batch would does not really get affected by it, because they're just creating the batch and the listing will be created. Does that answer the question?
I think so. Thank you for the shared information. And then the other one, from where it is coming from, is from Andy Adimulam. This one is actually addressed to all the service providers. Unfortunately, Mr. Dietz has already had his fair share of presentation, but if he's still on the line, maybe he will come later. Mr. Adimulam is asking that what kind of support will be offered to the new sheriffs? For example, can there be no cost of up to 3 months in order to try to support the upcoming and new sheriffs who enter their profession if they decide to make use of your system?
Yes, I think such an environment can be created. And that is more a commercial question than anything else. Certain expenses do get expended from our side when installing a system, visit to the office, setting it up, training, these type of things. I do believe our system is a month-to-month system. You pay, you pay and you use. But I will speak to my business partners, and we can come to an amicable solution where we can support new sheriffs in that manner. But then most likely what one will do from a commercial point of view is then you need to lock the person in for at least a couple of months, so that one can recuperate at least the costs it takes to do the installation. I think that is but fair.
And then the other one, the issue of how accurate is your system updated in line with the change in legislature, or particularly to the fee structures that are approved for the sheriffs to can charge?
Because our system is independently driven, we don't actually update the fees. We do supply a service where we can update the fees, but each office can update their own fees. There's sufficient tools and capabilities in the back end to do that. The history that the system came out of was an environment where there were so many multitudes of different ways of doing it. I then created a system whereby through master file creation, fees can be created in the back end. We designed a very well stable mechanism for that. And I see other systems have actually pivoted off that design of fee creation. But it is maintainable, and there are tools in the back end to very simply list out in terms of the order of what you would get it in the schedule of fees, and you can update your fees and do it from that point of view. But we can also supply a service where we do that for the sheriff itself.
Okay. And I also think it's also fair to also include the Venance question. How unique is your system?
The uniqueness of our system, I would say, it was the first system that actually made use of structured query language in the back end, very strong database structures. Secondly, it was designed, a lot of the design came from the queries from the sheriffs. The third area I think our system is strong in is the understanding that myself and my business partner, Eugene, has in the sheriff's profession, whereby we are able to translate functionality in the sheriff's office into activities within the system. And I think that's one of the strong points.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leslie. I don't see any questions from the chat box. So at this point, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you and also thank Eugene on our behalf for making time to make this presentation. I'm quite sure we have learned a lot. And then thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, and thank you to all the participants for their interest.